What's your YouTube? Dad here for Zephyr Games, bringing you a video that should probably help most of you out, and that is side decking on a budget for this meta. So what I mean by that is I'm going to be taking you through a couple of options. Now, evenly matched is here. You don't have to worry about it. You can take that if you think it's not too budget. I've kind of put like a £20 like block on it, because you can find evenly matches reprinted in Mega Pack 2018. £20 or less. This is the most expensive card in this side deck engine here. So if you can't get the 20 quid and you want to go for budget less than that, that's fine. Each of these cards cost a couple of quid maximum on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through all of these cards, explain to you why I think they're good against the current meta, and then of course if you want to be siding, you've got a bit more money, you've got your Drolls, you've got your ogres, your reapers, your bells, stuff like that. But this is pretty much anyone that can hit on a budget of 20 quid or less per card to make their individual extra deck. So without further ado, let me take you through what we've got. So we'll start off with the monsters. Of course, we've got Effect Veiler. So this can be an impermanence if you've got a bit more money, but Effect Veiler is very, very important. Now, the way I go about building my extra decks or side decks is I kind of look at cards. I base it on the majority that I feel that I'm going to face. So if I feel that my event that I'm going to is dominated by Sky Strikers, then I'll put in more cards that kind of out Sky Strikers without harming my deck's consistency. But I would kind of prioritise cards that are more generic. So for example, Effect Veiler is more generic. It will hit every single deck out there as long as the cards can be targeted. So I would prioritise this card above something like Denko that will only hit Sky Strikers and heavy back row decks unless the format is dominated. But obviously if I've got the space, then I would put both Denko and Effect Veiler in. Speaking of which, we do have the Denko. Now of course, Denko is an incredibly powerful card. It's been reprinted 3 times, I believe, a Mega Pack, the original print, and of course the secret print. So you can pick these up for a couple of quid. They might have gone up a little bit more because of the current hype in the format, but you still pick these up relatively cheaply. You drop this against a Sky Striker player, they can seriously struggle, but you need to make sure that A, your deck can play without using its normal summon, because that is what Denko will have to be, and then B, that you can kind of finish your opponent off that turn, because with Sky Strikers particularly, they can then out the Denko. It's also very, very good against Altergeist, but you need to make sure they don't have a... oh, what's the balance card? Silcoitus? I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I believe it's Silcoitus, the balance card monster that can then return Denko to hand. So you've got to be very, very careful they don't have that. Next up, we've got DD Crow. Now, DD Crow is probably the better example of Effect Veiler. I would prioritise Effect Veiler over DD Crow, because DD Crow will mainly only hit stuff like Sky Strikers when you banish their Ray, or a spell to stop them getting their additional draw, depending on what part of the game you're in. It can also hit some other decks as well. It can hit Gokis. So if they've got 2 Gokis in the graveyard and they've already searched out a rematch, if you have a way of banishing one of their Gokis, they can't activate rematch because it needs to be exactly 2. Obviously, if they have a way of putting more Gokis in the graveyard, then it's not worth using. Then on top of that, of course, you've got Thunder Dragons. You could banish their Thunder Dragons, but then of course they'll trigger an effect. But it really depends if they're trying to revive a card or anything like that. You can banish their Thunder Dragon Fusion. So the best thing about DD Crow is it is anything. Now, I would also mention Called by the Grave. That could be very, very useful, but that should be in a main, in my personal opinion, because there are hand traps just absolutely everywhere. Next up, you've got Hanawata. Now, the reason Hanawata is here for your budget players is because against the FTK, the only 2 options you really have is Droll and Lockbow, which is about 10 quid as a rare, and then, of course, Hanawata. Now, Hanawata is more for the budget players that can't get into a Droll or haven't been able to get hold of a Droll as of such, and that Hanawata... basically, during each player's turn, you discard this card to make any effect damage you take this turn 0. So this will stop the Cannon Soldier FTK. You do have to be very, very careful. It's not the best of cards. It's just a nice budget option. You'll probably pick up a common for about 10 to maybe £1. So it's not going to break the bank. If you have Drolls, by all means use the Drolls. If you don't, Hanawata for a budget player is the next best thing to get hold of. Next up, Dino Wrestler Panco Drops. Now this card is a common, it's 10p, it's cheap as chips, very, very easy to pick up, and I highly advise you getting hold of this. Very, very good card. It outs any card on the board, so if your opponent plays an Imperial Order, you special summon this, pop the Imperial Order, off you go, anti-spell, off you go. a monster, as long as it can be destroyed, off it goes. Panco Drops can be very, very good to bait out certain cards and cause your opponent a lot of issues, so I highly recommend Panco Drops. Now, a Kaiju. This is just generic Kaiju. This can be Raw Sphere Mode, this can be Lava Golem, this can be any Kaiju you wish. I always advise people to have at least one Kaiju if it's searchable, or maybe a couple of Kaijus to deal with your opponent's boards, because sometimes there may be that odd monster. For example, in the Thunder Dragon matchup, of course, they can't be destroyed by monsters or card effects, so you've got to be very, very careful. Whereas a well-timed Kaiju can really disrupt their plays, cause them a lot of issues, especially if you've got a lot of search cards in hand. If you Kaiju your opponent and then start going off on your searches, getting rid of their Colossus, then happy days, you've probably OTK'd them or finished them off, especially in something like Crusadia. Now moving on to the spells, Mind Control. Mind Control again is a very, very good, powerful card going second. So using this card going second, of course, you take control of one of your opponent's monsters. So if they do only have the one Colossus, take control of that Colossus, and you're sitting there quite pretty. You can use that as link material should you need to. Hey Trunade. Now Hey Trunade is the counterpart to Denko in the sense that with Denko, if you can't play without your normal summon, I would then advise Hey Trunade, because again, it hits Sky Strikers a bit more than it does Autogeist, because Autogeist can start flipping their cards and doing their thing with their plays. So it's very, very situational. So it is mainly more for one deck than not. But again, it's been reprinted in the Advent Calendar. It's been reprinted in the Legendary Hero decks. It's got so many prints that there's no reason not to have a playset of these. Shed Ride. Now, Shed Ride, again, as a gold, is about £5. Again, very, very good against the majority of decks right now. Thunder Dragons like to do a little bit of searching, nothing too major. It's more Sky Strikers that you'll get the draws off of. And this is just our replacement for Maxi at this moment in time. So unless Maxi comes back, this is your next best alternative. And it can be very, very helpful if you have these. I don't think it's a necessity, because again, it's mainly against Sky Strikers that it uses and abuses the best. So again, it's very, very cautious when you're using this. It can be very, very good against the FTK because they add a lot to it. But of course, they go into the FTK. So unless you've got a way of getting past Azathoth, if they make that with impermanence or something like that, then you've got to be very, very careful and the relevance of Shed Ride. Next up, Twin Twister, MST, any type of back row destruction. Again, this is another alternative to Hey Trunade. This is obviously better, in my opinion, against Sky Strikers, which is why I chose to go with, against Autogeist, which is why I chose to go with Twin Twisters over Hey Trunade this weekend, purely because I was like, well, if I face up against Autogeist, and if I don't face up against as many Sky Strikers, again in the scenario, I believe there's more uses for Twin Twister, Pendulum matchup and stuff like that, than there is Hey Trunade. Moving on to the traps, fun little tech of Waking the Dragon. This is purely if you can abuse that you've got a lot of back row and your opponent is then going to try and destroy them. You've got to be very, very careful, because of course they can play Hey Trunade and they can play Denko. So it's a bit more riskier. It is just a fun little tech to trial out depending on what type of deck you have. D-Barrier, very, very good card against Thunder Dragons. Slightly against Dinos as well, depending on how they're playing. We did see a couple of those floating around this weekend, and of course the Pendulum matchup, again we saw a couple of those floating around this weekend. It's got a bit more popular because of the Thunder Dragon matchup, so you do have to be very, very careful when playing it, but it is still very, very good and useful to use. Red Reboot, if you feel you're going to be going into a heavy trap format, Dracos are still around, and of course Autogeist. It's not a necessity right now, but there are Paleozoic Toads around as well. This, if you can shut your opponent down and then OTK, is very, very powerful. Alternatively, if you are a trap deck, use Red Reboot, Wiretap, and that can help you against Red Reboot. Rivalry of the Warlords. Now, you can also argue Gozen. The reason I'm putting Rivalry in here is because it is due to have a reprint in Hidden Summoners coming out later this week. And then, of course, on top of that, makes these cards go down in price because these will now be the lower rarity. Speaking of which, Rivalry, if you only play one type of monster, Rivalry can be incredibly powerful. It stops the FTK, it really, really slows them down. And it also slows down stuff like Sky Strikers because they're going into different ones as well. So then, of course, we've got the Evenly Matched. Again, quite self-explanatory on this one. If your opponent sets up a very, very powerful first turn board, as long as they don't have a trap negation on play, you evenly match them, set the board state back. Like I said, this is probably the hardest one to get a hold of out of all of these, and probably the most costly. But if you do manage to get a hold of them, I definitely say put them in your extra deck, especially if you're going second. Like stuff like Mech Knight and Vote, Very rare that a Mech Knight Invoke player will have a trap in his hand ready to stop evenly matched going first. And if you're going second build, you can even main evenly matched as well if you wanted to. So that is it for all the side deck options. Just a couple of options to kind of show you around. They're examples of budget options out there. Like I said, if you've got a bit more money to be putting in there, you'll be putting your Ashes, your Ogres, your Bells. You could put Reapers in there. Reapers are quite cheap right now, but then it does mean you will need the extra deck monsters as their targets, which can cause quite a few issues and bump the price up a little bit. You've also got Gozen. And there's probably a couple of others that I've missed off the list, but these are kind of like the main ones that do a job that the more expensive cards do, just not as good, but still gives you a fighting option. And the best thing about these is some of these your opponent won't expect. So when you drop stuff like Hanawata on them, they think they've got game, and they probably go, ah, he's not ashed me, he's not ogred me, I might not do Azathoth, let's just go with it. And then you go Hanawata, and they're just like, what? Effect Veiler again could be very, very helpful. And stuff like that. So you do have a lot of options and a lot of versatility with your side deck, and these are some great budget options for you. Anyway, I hope this has helped. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for this week. We have an amazing announcement coming up for you guys, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. It is very, very good, and it is us giving back to you guys with a little help from our friends at Tier 0 Games. Now, that is all I am saying for now. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and until next time, guys, as always, happy dueling. Also, YouTube, thanks for watching that video. I hope you liked it. If you did, hit that like button. And of course, don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button in the bottom left-hand corner and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. We've got more deck profiles, duels, pack openings, and many more Yu-Gi-Oh videos coming up for you all year round. So don't forget to stay tuned for all of that. Thanks, and as always, guys, happy dueling.